Right. So I'm just going to tell you what's happening. You're at the hepatic flexure. You have what I call a buckle just before the hepatic flexure, and the lumen is currently down at about 5 o'clock. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the buckle out, and as we do that, I want you to steer down to 5 o'clock using your right wheel and tip down as you pull the scope back, and it will allow you to get around the hepatic flexure.
So what I do first is also always get the orientation to know where the valve is, because then you know where the most quote unquote dangerous part of the cecum is, being it's been referred to as lawyer's triangle, which is now at my 9 o'clock. Appendix is on fus, a bit on folds. And then you really need to get behind the ileocecal valve to get a nice inspection of that area. And as you might notice, you really need to divide the cecum into different.
And if you don't mind, quickly, just how you do retroflexion in the right colon, we can deconstruct that later.
Yeah. So what I do is I get at the level of the valve. So the valve is now at my 8 to 9 o'clock. Just past it, this man has a quite wide colon, so I think I can do it on the valve. You go full deflection with both wheels, and sometimes a little bit of pushing in, but it was just 1 or 2 centimeters. You have to be really careful because you can't perforate the colon with the bendy parts. And now really need to look behind every single fold and rotate around. Again, this man has a wide colon, so that shouldn't be a big problem. And again, like with the cecum, try to be systematic with every fold that you examine.
We get to the cecum, and we think of it like this. And actually, it's sometimes perfectly possible to push it round. What people tend to do, or what I see a lot of people doing, is they do something called a long scope. They just push in, it pushes the loop down, it pushes the loop up, and you go around. And then when you reach the cecum, you pull back a lot, and you end up like this. And that's probably okay if the patient is having propofol, because this can be really quite uncomfortable. It's not very good if you're trying to operate here with this much scope in. So there must be a more elegant way to do this, and there is. So when we reach this point here, what we do is we pull back. That's the first thing to do. So pulling back is really important, but it's not the only thing we do. As I mentioned before, your splenic flexure, which is this, tends to rotate posteriorly. And because it rotates posteriorly, if you apply anti-clockwise torque, you will drag this direction. So this becomes shorter. So it effectively drives the tip in. And secondly, as you rotate anti-clockwise, instead of this looking like this, you invert the bucket handle. So you go from this, you put a lot of anti-clockwise torque on, goes lateral to where the ascending colon attaches. And in this situation, if you think about it, this is going posterior. So in theory, you should be applying anti-clockwise torque. But the principal problem is here, and you can see that you want to rotate the scope this direction, which is actually clockwise torque. And clockwise torque will lift this up and over. So if you go from this situation, so the first thing you need to do is you put clockwise torque on, and it lifts this up, and you end up in this situation. And then you put anti-clockwise torque on to drive this down and bring this forward into the cecum, which is why you went from going clockwise to anti-clockwise.